I'm really, really happy to be here with you guys. And what I'm about to tell you is true. That may seem like a funny way to start out something like this, but when people hear my life story, a lot of people don't believe it because it sounds so unbelievable. In fact, a literary agent recently thought it was an idea for a fiction novel. But every word I'm about to tell you is true, I promise. And I'm going to tell you about my story, my scars, my pain, my hurt, the good stuff too. And the second thing I want to do is tell you why I have hope and how I've been able to find this hope. And then the third thing I want to do is tell you 3 things that I know to be true, 3 things that I hope stick with you beyond tonight. And I want you to know that I've prayed for all of you. I didn't know all of you were coming, but I prayed for you. I prayed over every chair. And I hope that God uses what I have to say to speak to you personally. And I've also want to encourage you to cry with me, to laugh with me, and steel magnolias, anyone? If laughter through tears is your favorite emotion, then I hope you can do that with me too. So I want to start by telling you about little Karissa. So little Karissa grew up near here. I'm one of 4. I'm the 3rd girl. And my parents became Christians when I was like 2 years old. And then when I was 4, I remember driving in my mom's red Cadillac, and she said, I have to tell you guys something. It was me and my sisters. I'm sick. And she seemed really upset, but we said, Mommy, there must be something. Why don't we just go home and get you some medicine? And she said, it's not that simple. Okay, and I remember saying, well, let's go to the doctor. The doctor will fix you. And she just cried. She couldn't even say anything else. She had no more words. And then soon I learned the word cancer. And over the next several years, she really deteriorated. She went from being active with us and raising us to really being stuck full-time in bed upstairs. And by the time I was 11 years old, she was jaundiced, 80 pounds, slipping in and out of a coma. And one day we came home after my sister's basketball game, and there were people all around, friends and family, and the pastor there said, Lucinda has gone to be with the Lord. And I went into my room and I cried. But, one of my first thoughts was, man, you know what? Life is going to be a lot harder now. I know that without a mother, life is going to be a lot harder. But that means I'm going to have to try harder. That means that I'm going to have to be better, and I can't let her down. I can't be the excuse. She can't be the excuse for me to fall apart. I have to be better. And as I'm thinking through this and realizing that my life will never, ever be the same, my aunt comes into the room, and she said something that was very well-meaning, but as you guys know, people say well-meaning things that turn out to be very damaging. So she said, well, God needed another flower in heaven. So that's why your mom had to leave. And at first I thought, okay, I'm 11. Adults tell me things and I tend to believe them. But then over time, that got more and more of a sticking point. Like, how could God, who apparently created everything, be that weak and that selfish? And there's no way that this God can be kind. There's no way that this God can be powerful. But at that point, I was still a kid. My dad was making me go to church. All my friends were there. So I just, still go to church. But I was kind of thinking, this is not all totally adding up. And then when I was 14, I decided that I would go to a public school for the first time, leave my Christian school. And it was toward the end of the year. It was in April. And on this day, my sister and I were having lunch in the cafeteria. And it was already a little bit strange because normally we had a friend who picked us up every other day of the year. And for some reason this day, she forgot us. So my sister and I are sitting there and just sort of like didn't know what to do, felt kind of strange. And I was eating my pepperoni pizza and my tater tots. And then we hear this, pop, 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 pop. What's that? Is it like, so we're kind of like guessing amongst us, is it fireworks? Is it like some sort of senior prank? I don't really know what's going on. We were kind of joking about it. And then my teacher comes in and he screams, "Everybody get down. Everybody get down." And we knew that it was serious. His face was totally drained. And so as the shots got closer, my sister and I went from underneath the tables and ran up the stairs trying to get out of the school. And we were running together, and then suddenly I look over and I realize she's not there anymore. So I have a split second to make a decision. What do I do? Do I go back and get her? Or do I keep running? Because the door is closer to me than she is to me. And I heard the voice of a man, and it was the most calm, assured voice, and it said, "Don't be afraid," this voice. And then I heard a song that I had just learned a week earlier, and it goes, "Be not afraid, I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest." So I knew what to do. And I felt the most overwhelming peace I've ever felt in my life, before that or since. And I went back and got my sister, and we ran out of the school. And that was my first year at Columbine High School. And, you know, in the aftermath, of course, we were all completely traumatized. No one expected it. But for me, it was different. I was shocked, but somehow not surprised. You know, it was like I already knew that life was hard. I already knew that people died. I already knew that stuff happens that's not supposed to. So my reaction was very different. And, you know, at 14, the fact that I heard this voice just sort of faded in the background, and sort of, I thought, And, you know, the rest of high school, we were definitely a closer class, and, you know, mourned publicly, privately together. But I had 3 more years left of high school, so I did normal things. You know, I went to dances, and I dated and played sports. And my senior year, I met somebody named Greg. And Greg was a character. He was totally wild and reckless and like ridiculous and hilarious. And he made me laugh, and he made me sort of uncomfortable in a good way. I was like, "What are you doing now?" And, you know, we just fell in love. And he told me very early on when we were dating that because of 9/11, he decided that he was going to join the Marine Corps. And there's a fly. Shoot fly, don't bother me. Okay, well, I don't know. I wasn't prepared for a fly, but because I smell so good, I guess. Okay, well, truly. Can you just told me he was going to join the Marine Corps, that he wanted to do it out of love of his country. He hated what happened to us on 9/11, and he wanted to protect his country. He wanted to protect the people that he loved. So after we graduated, he went to boot camp and all the rest, and deployed for the first time. And then when he came back, we got married. And I was 19 and he was 20. And so we had a little bit of time together, and found out soon that he would be deploying again. So he went on his second deployment, and he left in the fall. And then in about December, I was studying for finals, And I just had this strange feeling that he was like missing, that the connection we had been broken somehow. And that's really the only way I can describe it. And I started to get worried, and I realized I hadn't heard my phone ring in a while. So I started looking around for it all over my house, and I looked in my car and I couldn't find it, and then I just happened to look on the ground and I see my phone and I turn it around and I had more than 20 missed calls. So I knew that if he wasn't gone, he was really, really seriously hurt. And then a little while later, the knock came at the door, the one you always hear about. And there's two of them. And they said Gregory Paul Rund was killed in action on December 11, 2004 in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq. And later, the same person who told me that got down on one knee, handed me a flag, and said, "On behalf of a grateful nation." And one of my first thoughts was, all right, I get it. You hate me. God hates me. You made me so that you could mess with me. You don't care about me. There's no way you're good. There's no way you're kind. You're just evil. Like, you just trick people, I think. And my dad is a great man of faith, and he said, just keep talking to God no matter what. Just keep talking to God. Whatever you have to say, he can handle it and he can hear it. And the first thing I thought was, nope, I'm not doing that. I got nothing to say. Nothing to say. And can't he read my mind anyway? Right? Like, what's the point of that, right? He knows that I'm like cursing him out. But then my dad says, you really should do this. And over time, I thought, it's like when you're mad at somebody at first, there might be a silent treatment. And eventually it's like, okay, let's have it out. So that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'll talk to God. So I yelled at him with all my breath, with everything that was in me. My anger just came out like lava. I was so angry. And I said every curse word in the book, every combination you could possibly think of. And I told God he was evil, he was sick, he was demented. And it was like one day I got this feeling that he was saying, okay, you want to fight? Let's fight. You're going to fight me, that's fine, but I'm going to fight for you. And I was like, good luck. Because I want nothing to do with you. Like, I figured you out, and there's nothing that you can do to get me back. And there's this verse that says, I stand at the door and knock. And that was always presented to me as a kid as like, Jesus stands at the door and he knocks, and you're like, hey, Jesus, come on in. Let's have a party. Like, we're totally cool. And with me, it was like, Jesus knocked, and I was like, what the do you want? I was so angry, you guys. I was so angry. And he would, walk away for a little while, give me my space. Just simply hanging out, but he wasn't knocking on the door. And then he would come again and knock on the door. And I'd say, what? What? I have nothing to say to you. You know how I feel. And he would knock again. And then eventually I said, what? Open the door just a crack. I didn't trust him. But I was kind of curious how he was going to defend himself, So I said, what? Can I come in? Sure. Sit down. What you got? I mean, it was like, you got to prove this to me, But I have to tell you that over time, God works in these big ways and these small ways in all of us. And there are some things that gradually started to change me. Some things that I learned. some things that I think he deliberately wanted to show me. And one of them is that I read Job. Oops, I said to myself, I don't think I played this right. This was kind of a mistake. So, I read Job, and Job obviously is put through the most horrible things you can imagine, right? His family is killed, his livelihood is destroyed, he has boils all over his body, and he really wants an audience with God, and amazingly, God gives it to him. And God says, gird your loins like a man. Oh. So Job was like, okay, sorry I asked, probably. But then God spends chapters and chapters, I don't know, in real life, 20, 30 minutes, being like, were you there when I poured the foundations of the earth? Do you set the limits for the waves? Do you walk on the depths of the ocean, on the ocean floor? Can you tell this and that creature when to stop, when to do that? Do you tell the sun when to rise? Do you have the keys to the storehouses of snow and hail in the heavens? And Job does, in my opinion, the only logical thing and goes, I am so sorry. I can't bring myself any lower. Like, I can't, I'd be as flat as possible, and it's not enough. Like, I didn't know what I was saying. I was wrong. And I read that and I realized God doesn't owe me anything. And for me, that was really, really important. And just want to tell you guys point blank, I care very much what happened to you. But regardless of what it is, it doesn't mean that you can just do that. It doesn't mean that God doesn't have like other things for you. So, and that he doesn't want to redeem whatever happened to you. So that was huge. And it was like, also though, it said there's room for doubt. It's okay if you doubt. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not a sin. I learned a lot about God's mercy in that, because I'm pretty sure he struck people dead for not as bad of things. And I did all the things that he could have just been like, she's gone, right? So I was like, thank you. I still don't get it. I still thank you. Kind of suck, but don't hurt me. And I learned about his forgiveness, that he could forgive me for talking to him that way. How many of us could do that? How many times did you push someone away and say awful things to them, and they're just like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then I started to think about people's role in the bad things that happen in the world. And people make bad choices that change everything, that make us hurt. And people are not God. So I had to be able to separate the hurts that I had, with the church, with my family members, with family friends, from who God is. And I had to find out more about who God is, right? And that's part of what Job did for me. And that's also true with what happened at Columbine. Those kids made a choice. And I meditated and remembered more of what God said to me at Columbine, and what could that mean. It means, among other things, that God is with us no matter what, and that when he says that, he means it. And that I don't know why I was there, but God was there. And that's more important. That's a more important thing to know. And then the next thing is, I realized that God didn't want Greg, my husband, to die. So I thought he was sick and he got a little jolly out of it. But that's not what the Bible shows us. What the Bible shows us is that God was mourning with me, that was his son, that he was deeply affected by what happened and wishes it was a different world. And then I also pictured God in a different way. So I realized when I think of God, I pictured Jesus up on the cross, pretty far away. His face doesn't really have any features. And so he's not feeling anything or showing me anything about himself. And so I started to imagine when I would talk to God that I was like literally sitting with him and or in the same room. At first we were not sitting together. We were very far apart. Is the truth. And it was like my heart was encased in this ice that was so hard. And this ice was all around it. And over time it just sort of melted away. But there's still all these broken pieces everywhere. So what do you do with those, you know? And God just sort of over time with these things and others mended those broken pieces and put them back, created a whole again. But I have to tell you that healing hurts, right? Yes, it does. Any of you who've been through stuff, and all of you have, know that this is true. Healing hurts. And God does the work, but you also have to sign up. You have to agree. It's your choice. He gives us free will. So it's kind of like having surgery. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. I know a lot about this. But when I first started talking about this, I used the example of the knee. But it's like having surgery. So you know that something's wrong with you, and the only way to fix it is to go through surgery, right? So you've tried whatever, the creams, the injections, the pills, anything and everything, right? Because no one wants to do surgery. But it's the only option. So you submit to it. You say, okay, I know that I'm going to have to go through something really hard to get to something better. I know I'm going to have to go through all of this pain to get healed. And another reason why you're able to do that is because you trust your surgeon. You go, okay, this person knows what they're doing, right? They've done this before. They know how to heal human hearts. They know how to fix a knee. And at the end of your surgery, you have to go through physical therapy. So like it's not over. It's a lot you have to sign up for. And in some ways it's easier just to say, I'm good. I'm just going to pretend like what? No, nothing bad's ever happened to me. I'm totally fine. Totally cool. But it just doesn't work. I mean, you have to go through and not around. So I was willing to go through, and God really met me there. And during this time, it was like this kind of awakening of my soul, and everything was so much better, and I was learning more and more about God, and I had such a peaceful, wonderful time in my 20s. I was killing it in my career. I had tons of friends. I was in DC. I was just really loving my life. And when I was 30, I decided I wanted to move back to Colorado, where I'm from, you guys know. And so I moved back to Colorado when I was 30. And when I came back, I was end of 2014, I started hanging out a lot with my husband's brother. So, it was unexpected in a way, not at all. But him and I started hanging out a lot, and when we started hanging out a lot, we realized, oh, there's a mutual more than like here. And so we decided to give it a try, which was pretty wild. And Doug, people always ask, is he a lot like Greg? Does he look like him? You know, people are like, that's like the question they want to know. And I'm like, well, they have similarities, but they look quite different. And, you know, Doug is like blonde hair, Greg had brown hair, different color eyes. But they definitely have the same kind heart, absolutely. And so, and Doug is just the sweetest. He always thinks about ways that he can help you. And so things were going really well. And I had just started a new job. I was really excited about it. And then one day I had this pain, just like stabbing, like debilitating. I curled up in a ball on the floor in the bathroom, kind of pain. And I actually tried to go to work. That didn't work. So I stopped on the way to work, and then I decided I needed to go to the ER, and something I thought was really wrong. But they initially told me that I had gas. Yeah. I wasn't planning on saying that, by the way. So they were like, you have gas. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go. I cannot tell this new guy I'm dating. Like, he was like, what's wrong? I was like, nothing. I'm just going to be at my dad's, so everything's fine. Yeah, so that was interesting. But the pain got worse. So I thought, damn, if this is gas, like, this is the worst gas anyone's ever had in the history of the world. Like, I couldn't believe it. But then I'm taking Vicodin, and they give me Oxy and all this crazy stuff, right? So I mean, I don't think gas is that formidable of a foe. It just didn't make sense. So I went to the ER again, and I found out that there was a mass in my colon, and that the mass was a tumor. The tumor was cancer, and that the cancer was stage 4. I was 31, and I'd already had the life that I'd had. And I was sort of like, the shock of these things happening to me had kind of gone away. But still, being 31, not having really a family history, having very few symptoms, I was very, very surprised. And I had to do chemo quickly. It was all a big drama. Everything happened very fast. So I find out that I have to do 6 months of chemo. And this chemo is particularly punishing because I have a pump that I have to have with me. So it's not just like you get chemo and then you go home. It's like you get chemo and you go home with more chemo pumping inside of you over another 3 days. And then you go back and get disconnected, like some sort of toxic robot or something. And I want to tell you guys how chemo felt like. Chemo kind of feels like, imagine going into a mechanic's garage, okay? Like the smells, the stickiness, you know, the toxicity, like it kind of gives you that light headache, like lightheaded headache. And then put a garbage truck in the mechanic's garage, okay? It's full. It's got trash in it, obviously. And it stinks, it's smelly, it's sticky, all of that. And then somehow like ingest it. Eat it, put it in your veins, smell it. That's how chemo felt. That's the best I can get. And in the almost 4 years I've been dealing with this, I've been in the hospital about a dozen times. I've had 7 surgeries. And in addition to the chemo, a clinical trial where they gave me an experimental medicine and then literally shocked me with an electric shock. And that didn't work. But I was in a very different place with this particular event than I had been in the past. Which is that it's not to say that I haven't questioned God or that it doesn't still hurt tremendously. But a couple of years before this happened and before I moved back to Colorado, I got baptized. And for me, that was saying, no matter what, God, I'm with you. I understand enough. And what I do understand is more important than what I don't understand. So I'm never leaving you. I know you're not leaving me, and I'm never leaving you, no matter what happens. And I said that like, no matter what happens. But please, don't you think that it's been enough? Please? But as much as you can when you're not in crisis, I tried to surrender all of my moments to God. And so it's been so different with cancer because I've been in the fight, but God's been in the fight with me. I have to tell you, that's a lot better. That's a lot better. And in the middle of chemo, Doug actually got on one knee, asked me to marry him. Yes. So, I know, amazing, right? Can we get some applause for Doug? Thank you. He's going to see this, so I want him to know he's appreciated. But God is like fighting with us, alongside of us, and it's made such a difference. And this is not something, unfortunately, I feel like I'm past. I still have pain. I'm definitely still in the fight. And I want to do something real quick. Can I have the three of you stand up? I'm not going to have to, you don't have to do anything crazy. Okay? So the three of you represent the odds that I will survive. Okay, sit down. Thank you. And then will everyone else stand up, please? Okay, this is depressing. But these are the odds that I will die from cancer. You can sit down. Thank you. 8%. But there's really, really good news. My last 3 scans have been clear. Yes. And I have another one in a few weeks. If that's clear, I'll have a whole year under my belt, which would be amazing. Yes. Thank you. Please. And there's 2 things in the life of Jesus that have really helped me face down the Goliath of cancer that I want to talk to you about. The first is the cross. And so what I started doing during chemo was I pushed my fingers together like this, and it served to remind me of what Jesus did for us on the cross. And not in the thank you for a salvation that's very hard to understand, but just like how he suffered, what he suffered. And I learned about how he died. And it brought total different perspective. I don't know if you guys know that he was under such extreme stress that that's what broke his capillaries and made him sweat blood. And the cross was probably about 80 pounds. So he fell 3 times, the Bible says. And they've done tests that show that he probably had skull fractures. He might have fractured his neck. And then they think how he actually died was that his lungs filled with fluid because he couldn't lift anymore. And he eventually suffocated. And by the way, this is the most terrible execution, death ever devised by man. And he did that, and he did that for us. And God the Father watched his son be tortured to death. And so it just makes me realize that my agony is shared and understood, and that when he says God with us, he's really been here. He's been through physical pain, but also emotional pain, shame. He was naked. Shame and all of these other emotions, betrayal on the cross. And then the second thing in the life of Jesus that's spoken a lot to me in these incredibly dark moments where I've been like, okay, God, if it's time, like, I can't say I'm not ready. Like, I'm in a lot of pain, is the story of Lazarus. Now, when I was a kid, this was my favorite story, and I could talk on and on about it, but I can't. So Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. So he sees his friend has died. He comes to where he's been buried. And Mary, Lazarus' sister, who also knows Jesus, this is like his posse, runs up and says, "Where were you?" Essentially, how could you? Where were you? And Jesus cries. And when it says Jesus wept, that's kind of like flat in English. When you look up really what it means, it's like this soul-crushing weeping, like comes from the very deepest parts of you crying. He sobbed. And in the middle of his tears, Jesus shouted to his friend, "Get up, Lazarus, get up." And from this moment, we know that God works miracles, but we also know that God is kind and that he's powerful. You see how this story undoes what I was taught as a child, right? And we know that he has feelings. I can tell you how healing that's been for me to realize that God has feelings. I mean, I know that he came down as Jesus and whatnot, and, but still, it's like the sinless life. It's kind of hard to identify with, but to just picture Jesus there weeping. And why was he crying? I like to wonder, why do you think he was crying? Was it because his friend had just died? Was it because he knew that this was the condition of all of humanity and it wasn't supposed to be this way? So he was crying not just for his friend, but for all of us. And a different take on it, I think, is maybe he was crying because he realized he had to take Lazarus out of heaven and bring him back to this broken place. Take him out of the perfect place where he knew he was happy with his Father, never to be hurt again, and bring him to this broken place. And I think that this is a metaphor for how God acts in our lives. He brings the broken parts of us back to life. He can take your soul, whatever is dead in you, and bring it back to life. And he's done that for me, and I know he can do it for all of you, no matter what it is. Because I got some stuff, He can do it for you too. But it's also like literal. It's a metaphor for literal resurrection, that we will have new bodies, that in heaven we will be restored, but beyond that we'll have new bodies. And I used to think of heaven as really the joy of heaven is the absence of what's there, right? That heaven is a wonderful place because there's no tears, there's no darkness, there's no sorrow. Nobody can shoot you. You don't get cancer. And those are all wonderful things. But I read something, it was actually about physics, that changed my perspective on heaven totally. Darkness is just the absence of light. Darkness in and of itself has no power. It's just the absence of something. So what makes heaven great and what makes heaven heaven is not what it lacks, but what it possesses. And what it possesses is God, right? God is there. God is there. And to be in the presence of someone who loves you perfectly and eternally, who made you, who sees no fault in you, is just something I can't imagine. And I'm like so excited. I would say I can't wait, but that's kind of like tempting fate, I think. So I can wait. That's like me. That's like my joke with God. I'm like, I can wait. So please, I would like to wait. But I'm so excited, and we all should be, to be in the presence of God and to have that restored, all of that restored, like to be how we were meant to be, which is with God. And then my third point here is the three things I know to be true, the three things I hope you guys take with you. He's fighting for you. Number one, he's fighting for you right now. He is the light that never grows dim or fades. Whatever dark moment you're in, he is there. He wants to bring whatever's dead in you back to life because he loves you. Just that simple. In your broken, dead places, he wants to come there and heal you. And he is a fighter. He's a fighter. But he's not fighting you, he's fighting for you. You're worth it to him. You're worth it. Number two, you're not a mistake. So I wasn't supposed to say this either, but I've said to my husband, God didn't make me so that somebody could clean up your socks. God made me. Whoops. God made me for a purpose. God designed what I would look like, my parents, where I'd be born, for a purpose, because he has this big plan for all of us, right? You're not an experiment. You're here for a reason. And at Columbine, there was a bomb right next to me that could have gone off. And if it would have killed me instantly and probably about 800 kids. Instantly. And, I used to think, well, like I'm special because I could have just been blown up, but I wasn't. So woo, little pep in my step. And, I think that God did spare me for a reason. But the truth is, when I thought about it more, I realized we all have things like that in our lives. either seen or unseen. Like maybe you just missed being in a car accident. Maybe you didn't, Maybe God saved you from something that you didn't know about. And then I realized that we really all have this assurance. And we're here because God wants us here. And we should find power in that, right? Not a mistake, here on purpose. Number 3. Okay, I've been there. I've tried other stuff, Spend your life with God. It's the best way. It's the best way. And no matter what happens to you, it's going to come with like hard moments and hard things. No matter what. Everybody has those. But go through them with God. And if you believe in God, He'll be there to comfort you and to teach you. And there's a part in Jesus' ministry where He does something that's like a little off kilter, and people don't really understand it. And He says to the disciples, "Are you going to leave too?" Because people are like, "That's weird. I'm getting out of here." And He's like, "Are you going to leave too?" And Peter goes, essentially, "Where would I go? You have the words of life. Where would I go?" So that's what I found. And then the last thing I'll say is I want to get back to this idea of scars. So this scar on my chest has kind of a boring story, which is that there's no story. A lot of people think that maybe I got injured by like shrapnel or a bullet, or like maybe I should invent a shark attack or something. But really, I don't know how this happened. So this represents the things in life that hurt that we don't understand. And this scar is the result of 7 surgeries. 7 surgeries. At least my underwear was cute. I didn't give you guys the boring stuff. I wasn't planning on that either, but didn't give you the boring stuff. So, but this is going to be healed. We've done all sorts of stuff to try to fix this, you guys. This is closed by a plastic surgeon because my last surgery was an abdominal reconstruction where they moved everything around, put new stuff in that's not supposed to go there. And I've had injections, creams, all sorts of things to try to make the scar better. And it's not getting better. It's not going to get better. But, and that's this, with my mom, like she had these huge horizontal scars from her mastectomy on her chest. But I know that my scar, that my mother's scar, that even Greg, who didn't even have time to scar, he has holes in his body. He had holes in his body. Those kids had holes in their bodies. Those are all going to be healed. And there's only one person in heaven who's going to have scars. Jesus. My hope is that this brought you some healing and maybe some understanding. And it has been a true honor to be here with you. Thank you. Oh, my mother lost it up. Yeah. Started the trend. Thanks, guys. Thank you. You're so sweet.